question, how long is a sitcom episode? 20 minutes without commercials, right? Cool. Keep that number in your head because today's story is about an entire war that didn't even last 2 of those. I mean the sitcoms. And trust me, I'm not being cute with the maths. This is a real documented war, the Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896. Officially the shortest war in recorded history. 38 minutes. Some sources say up to 45 because apparently even the historians can't agree on whose stopwatch to trust. But either way, you could not finish a Chipotle bowl before the war started and ended. Quick geography, because I guarantee most of you have never once had a reason to think about this. Zanzibar is an island off the coast of East Africa, near Tanzania. For centuries, it was one of the wealthiest trading hubs in the region, mostly thanks to cloves, ivory, and less proudly one of the largest slaves markets in East Africa. By the 1890s, it technically wasn't a British colony. It was a protectorate, which is a very fancy, very polite way of saying, we don't own you, we just get the final say on everything you do. Cool arrangement, very fair, very not colonialism at all. And here's the detail that makes this whole thing click. Under the terms, any new sultan had to get a Britain consul's personal sign-off before taking the throne. Not a vote, not a formality, an actual permission slip from a foreign government just to run your own country. So, late August 1896, the sitting sultan, a guy named Ahmad, who was cooperative and about as pro-Britain as a Zanzibari royal could get, just straight up drops dead. A lot of people at the time immediately went poison, and a lot of people had a pretty specific relative in mind. Within hours, his cousin named Khalid marches into the palace and just declares himself the new sultan. He didn't wait for Britain's permission slip, just did it. And to be fair to Khalid for one second, this wasn't some random power grab out of nowhere. A lot of ordinary Zanzibaris actually liked him, specifically because he seemed like someone who could push back against foreign powers running their country, which is an understandable impulse. Britain predictably wasn't into that impulse at all. The British consul on the island, a guy named Basil Cave, immediately told Khalid to stand down. Khalid ignored him completely and instead barricaded himself inside the palace complex with something like 2,800 to 3,000 supporters, plus a handful of artillery pieces that, in a detail I genuinely love, had mostly been gifts. Previous British and European governments had literally given the Sultanate cannon as friendly diplomatic presents over the years, and now those same cannons were pointed back at the British fleet. Incredible use of a gift receipt. Meanwhile, Cave didn't actually have the authority to just start a war on his own. He did the most bureaucratically British thing imaginable. He sent a telegram all the way back to London, essentially asking, "Hey, so are we allowed to open fire on the guy's palace or what?" And London's official reply was basically, and I'm barely paraphrasing here, "You're authorized to do whatever you think is necessary. Just don't do anything you are not sure you can pull off successfully." Which has to be the most confident vote of confidence a government has ever given, while also covering its own butt completely. Somewhere in an office in London, someone signed off on a war the way you would approve a co-worker's slightly risky vacation request. With the lukewarm blessing secured, Britain started stacking warships in the harbour. By the morning of the 27th, they had multiple cruisers, a couple of gunboats, over 100 marines and several hundred pro-Zanzibari troops, all packed outside a wooden palace complex. That fun fact actually included the first building in East Africa wired for electricity. So genuinely cutting-edge architecture. Zero defense against warship. Rear Admiral Harry Rawson sent Kaid the ultimatum: stand down and leave the palace by 9 a.m. or we open fire. Kaid sent back a message saying he simply didn't believe the British would actually shoot at him. At 9 o'clock sharp, August 27th, British ships opened fire on the palace. Khalid's entire navy consisted of one single armed royal yacht named the Glasgow, which fired back exactly once before getting sunk almost immediately. Reportedly, its masts stuck up on the harbour for the next 18 years, just permanently visible, like the world's saddest landmark. Imagine growing up on the island and just having the wreck of our own navy at a fixed point on the horizon for 2 straight decades. The wooden palace itself started catching fire and collapsing within minutes, because it turns out, first electrified building in East Africa and built to withstand naval artillery are 2 completely different design goals. By the time the white flag went up, somewhere between 38 and 40 minutes after the first shot, roughly 500 people on the Zanzibari side were dead or wounded. On the British side, there was exactly 1 injury, and even that seems to have been more bad luck than actual combat. Final scoreline, 500-1. Khalid himself slipped out during the chaos and ran straight to the German consulate for asylum, since Germany had its own competing interests in East Africa and wasn't exactly eager to hand a fellow anti-British symbol back over. The same afternoon, Britain had already installed their preferred replacement, a much more cooperative guy named Hamoud, as the new sultan. Yes, Hamoud and the previous sultan Ahmad are basically the same name with 1 letter swapped, which I assume was incredibly confusing for absolutely everyone involved. As for Khalid, his story didn't even end there. which somehow makes it funnier and sadder at the same time. He stayed in exile in German territories for 2 decades, completely fine, until the British finally captured him during the First World War. Nearly 20 years after his war lasted less than a school assembly, he got shipped off to the Seychelles, then St. Helens of all places, which is the same island Napoleon got exiled to. So at least he was in an exclusive company. He was eventually allowed to return to East Africa and lived out his life in Mombasa, dying peacefully in 1927. So the guy who lost the shortest war in history technically outlasted the war itself by 31 years. And look, I know some of you are thinking, because I thought so too, surely there have been other embarrassingly short wars, right? There have been a few contenders over the years, wars that got settled in a day or two, skirmishes that fizzled out before anyone officially shows up. None of them came close. Most short wars still take hours of actual fighting or stretch across a couple of days of back and forth. Zanzibar is the only one where historians have to specify to the minute it started and the minute it ended, because the whole thing fits inside a single continuous stopwatch run. So let's recap the whole thing. An entire nation had a succession dispute over a 1-letter name difference, called in actual warship, fired for under an hour, killed roughly 500 people, and wrapped the whole thing up faster than it takes to sit through the trailers before a movie. Historians don't call this the smallest war ever, or the least significant one, just the fastest. Most wars drag out for years and leave behind decades of consequences to untangle. This one barely gave anyone time to update their group chat before it was already history. And genuinely, calling it war at all feels a little generous. One side had modern naval artillery, the other side had a beautiful wired electric palace, and a boat that hadn't done anything useful in years. This wasn't really a battle so much as a demonstration of exactly how much firepower one government was willing to point at another to get its way. So next time an argument with your roommate drags on for like 3 days over something dumb, remember that an entire country once resolved a full-blown succession crisis, warships and all, in less time than it takes you to find a parking spot at a mall on a Saturday. And if you are wondering whatever happened to Zanzibar after all this, Britain kept running things as a protectorate for another 6.5 decades. It wasn't until 1963 that Zanzibar actually became independent, and even then, it merged with mainland Tanganyika the following year to form the country known as Tanzania. That's the story. See you next time. Like and subscribe.